Welcome to the Why Did I Get Cancer podcast. I'm Deborah Herlax-Enos, a small-town girl turned TV nutritionist and healthy living expert. I design health programs for the average guy or gal, including those average guys named Metallica. On September 1st, 2020, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I asked every oncologist the same question, why did I get cancer? But none of my doctors had good answers for me. I wanted answers, and that's why I started this podcast. I want to help you to lower your cancer risk and provide self-care tips for those in the battle. I'm getting answers, and I want to share them with you. Welcome to part one of my so interesting conversation with Keith Bishop. Keith Bishop is the founder of a website called Prevail Over Cancer. He's a clinical nutritionist. He's a cancer fighting coach and he's a retired pharmacist. He's a wealth of information. And I always find his information so shocking. You've got to follow him on Instagram. And one of the things we talked about today, which again, I found so shocking, was black plastic. Plastics in our environment, we know microplastics are not good for us. It can disrupt our hormones. When our hormones get disrupted, we have lots of inflammation and just a cascade of health problems. But what we talked about today was black plastic. So think about rotisserie chicken containers, very typical takeout containers like from a sushi place, or even the coffee pods are often black. Those are, according to a study that was published last year, often made with recycled computer parts. Yes, recycled computer parts. And they are highly carcinogenic. There's things in them like flame retardant, and they are magnified when they are heated up. So if you bring home hot food from a restaurant and it's in a black plastic container, I'm thinking there's got to be a better way. So you've got to join the podcast today. Got to give it a listen. Keith gives us some really great tips on how to mitigate the effects of the things that are in our environment, because we know that these things are not going away. We just need to learn how to manage them. I felt like, again, his tips were really manageable, something I can easily do. So give it a listen. I know you'll enjoy it. You're busy. I love it. Mm-hmm. I love it. And, I first found you on Instagram, it's where I seem to hear about a lot of my guests. And you had this great Instagram, and it's grown. And I will say your information is spot on, but it's shocking. And it's also irritating.
Yes,
Can I just say that to you without insulting you?
Yeah, well, I've actually had people that complained to Meta, and Meta shut down my account. And then the Meta comes back a week later and says, well, we were in error. What you were saying is correct. We apologize. And now you have to start over again. Okay.
Oh, you're kidding.
Wow. And so
you went to Meta jail.
Yeah, exactly. Or got slapped, or whatever you want to call that. And yes.
Yep. I've been slapped too, but let's just keep doing what we're doing, because exactly. I think if we're not getting slapped around a little bit, we're not doing anything significant.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
We need to be forthcoming and not try to hide. It's tempting. And matter of fact, I wasn't feeling well the other night, so I asked my associate that helps me post things for me. And I said, I'm not feeling good. Oh no, actually the heater went out. And so I couldn't do a post that night. We didn't have heat. It's 19 degrees Fahrenheit, and
oh boy,
no heat, and it's going to get cold. It's going to get down to 13 in the morning. So I was trying to take care of that. So I asked my associate to post that for me, but I said, make it a positive post, and one that's, and so I try to do more positive than negative.
Yeah.
And so just so people realize that, people complain, oh, I can't eat or drink anything. Everything, causes cancer. Well, that's not the case.
Not true. Yep. Not true.
There's just a few things that we need to be careful about, and that we need to be doing and making changes. The goal is we don't have to be perfect. We got to make changes.
We don't have to be perfect. We don't. And if you go on social media this time of year, I feel like I'm getting slapped around by people of do this, don't do that. And I'm actually really limiting my social media scrolling now, because I feel like, gosh, I do so many of the right things, but if you watch too much junk online, it just makes you think, wow, there's no hope. There's no hope. And I have to change
Right.
all of these things, and they're going to be crazy expensive. And that is not the case, Keith, right?
Right. Exactly. If
Yeah.
anything, I'm kind of throttling back myself a little bit on the
Hmm.
amount of time I spend, and uh, because there's only so much in a time in a day, and
Yeah.
with relationships, friends and spouse, family, it's so important, and it's easy to get sucked into doing more. Anyway, so if anything, I'm kind of throttling it back a little bit,
Yeah.
but
Good
that's
for you.
okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
That's
okay.
okay.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I love connecting more with people and less with devices.
Hmm.
So let's jump into our podcast.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
So you are an expert. And I think one of the areas where you really excel is reading research and then surprising or shocking people with your findings. So, what makes you an expert? And then I want you to shock me.
Shock you. Well, let's see. An expert. Well, trained as a pharmacist,
Right.
and
Yeah.
back in the '70s when I was in pharmacy school, everything was research. Evidence based. We researched ourselves. We experimented ourselves and wrote
Mhm.
research papers, and even I had an oncology rotation in college, at the university, and but everything was about research, and so and that is actually a pharmacist is really just trained as that, a scientist. Matter of fact, I had chemistry every single year of college for five
Mm.
years. Every semester,
Oh,
I
yeah.
had chemistry, everything from physical chemistry to organic
Yep.
chemistry to medicinal chemistry to pharmaceutical. So
Yeah.
I had it all. But it's all science, and so
Yeah.
therefore, I don't feel good until I can read and prove. I may hear something and think, oh, there could be a concern, like, yes, on watch bands that are plastic. There's a concern about that, and so this is a metal band. I'm trying to reduce plastic
Hmm.
exposure. There's no really research that I've seen about those plastics, but so I'm not making a post yet. But when I
Okay.
I
Hmm.
see that research, I may have share that information. But anyway, I have to read things. That's the only way I feel good about it,
Yeah.
and that I can share that. There's enough, because I want, number one, I want to do what's right, and number two, you know, there's some accountability, and
Yeah.
on social media, and
I
so
agree.
and
Yeah.
and people are going to present their opinions, but opinions aren't still the research. So and
Right. There's a lot of self proclaimed experts out there.
right,
And, they're walking through Costco. Let me show you the top, 5 protein sources from Costco. And then they recommend, microwaving it in plastic to warm it up. And I just
right.
think, oh my gosh, are we still
Oh, the
telling people?
Teflon pan, they're cooking.
Right, right. Are we still telling people to use the nonstick Teflon pans and plastic because convenience? You pay a price with convenience.
Mhm.
But I'm also what I call myself a shortcut cook. So I know how to put a good meal on the table quickly without using plastic in a microwave and, nonstick pan. But so here comes the shocking part.
Okay.
I would like you to shock the podcast host. And there was one in particular, which I'll just tell you how to shock me.
Okay.
Um, Collagen. And I'd love to hear maybe your top 2 or 3 things that you found shocking and surprising in your quest to help people prevail over cancer.
Okay, sure. And so, yes, one of those recent things that I shared was about collagen protein.
Hmm.
And so I've used it for years myself, and it makes sense. It has the collagen helps to strengthen hair, skin, nails, bones, and according to theory, and there's some science behind it, but those are the basic nutrients our body has to have to strengthen collagen. Collagen is kind of like rebar,
Yep.
and it strengthens hair, skin, nails, bones. I have a history of that. Matter of fact, both of my hips are replaced.
Mm.
And I'm very I've stood up my whole life for work. I'm actually
Right.
sitting down for this podcast because it just actually looks better. But normally I even stand during appointments all day long. Um, I ride horses and gone 40 miles a day on a horse. And so I've just kind of like worn out, or it could have been my rheumatoid arthritis. I have a history of that also. But anyway, warm out. So therefore, and then also, I did a genetic test,
Hmm.
3X4 genetics, and the number one warning that came back from the company says, I have hard time making collagen. And
Interesting.
so actually, so the number one thing is you have a hard time making collagen, and you should not do contact sports, which, include
Well,
basketball and football and riding horses. And so
well, that's just wonderful news, isn't it, Keith?
exactly. Yeah. But I'm actually not a big person, and part of that is still collagen. My vitamin D receptor doesn't work, which is a
Mhm.
cancer risk. And so I'm just not a big person. So, and I wasn't able to do sports. I could not
Well,
compete
thank
with
the
those.
Lord for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
could not compete. I went into music and realized I couldn't make a living. I was not a great musician. I didn't like to practice. I liked performing, being on stage, but I didn't like to practice. So I became a pharmacist and kind of just started from ground zero in college and lost a year of college and started studying and doing that. But now I know that I can't make collagen. So therefore I was doing collagen protein. And then I thought, well, what's the science behind this? Now, there's a little bit
Hmm.
of a concern with collagen protein in that it's actually lacking one amino acid, which is tryptophan. And,
Okay.
and tryptophan is the precursor to brain chemicals, antidepressant,
Right.
serotonin, and which is
Yep.
the precursor to melatonin. So it's not a complete protein. So we shouldn't, and I've always been telling my clients that we don't rely on it all day long. I mean, it can be one of your proteins a day, but don't do it as your only protein because you run into a problem. So it's not a complete protein.
Hmm.
And then I came across, I thought I need to study this and came across some studies showing that, well, cancer cells actually and tumors use it to strengthen the tumor and to help out with metastasis. And I kind of sat back on it a little bit, and I kept studying this because cancer cells actually use the same nutrients that every other cell in our body needs.
Right.
And so, vitamin C, calcium, magnesium, methylfolate, I mean, everything. So, but yeah, I feel like there's enough of a concern showing that it strengthens this tumor and helps it to grow and move that I need to share that because my clients can't wait 10 years for more studies to come out.
Right. Better to get out ahead of it if there's even just a smattering of information about it. And it sounds like there's enough that it's gotten your attention.
It has, and so
Hmm.
there's no human study because it's so new. There's no human studies showing that people that take um, collagen protein
Hmm.
powders and consume those have an increased risk. It's too new. We don't know.
Okay.
And
Okay.
actually, it's just not been studied. There's no intake forms for that to evaluate that. And once
Right.
again, so it's going to be, it's a time factor. There are definitely other protein powders available, and I love smoothies. I
Hmm.
drink them. I recommend them all the time, and using proteins in those smoothies rather to be more specific. I do like that, but so I encourage my clients actually, to do things like bioflavonoids and vitamin C, with proteins to bind that together to allow the body to make collagen.
Hmm. Okay.
And
That's a
so,
good tip.
yes,
So, would you recommend just including a food source of vitamin C or an actual vitamin C supplement
this,
with consumption of a protein meal?
I'm not in cancer treatment,
Hmm.
chemotherapy treatment, or nor radiation. So I am taking a vitamin C capsule that has
Hmm.
bioflavonoids in it also, and rutin, rutin.
Hmm.
And so those items actually do help the body to make more collagen.
Okay, that's a good tip.
And so, yes, I think it's necessary. My fingernails aren't ideal. I do bruise easily. I also take, I take a lot of herbal supplements,
Mm-hmm.
and all of those have some, they can prolong bruising. I'm very active. I've got horses and cattle and property and help my friends with their cattle. And so I'm always hitting things and bruising. And so I kind of use that as a little bit of a monitor to see how I'm doing it. And I do better when I take the vitamin C with bioflavonoids, to help my body to make more collagen. I don't bruise as easy. So that's kind of my evidence for that.
That's really interesting. So my takeaway from you shocking me about collagen is I do put a very popular brand of collagen in my coffee every morning, and I have for 10 years. So my takeaway is perhaps pumping the brakes on that, or
Yeah. I, I personally, I still might do some. I'm
Mhm.
not totally avoiding it. And so I would do some, and I don't know if I would do it every single day. But also kind of depends on a kind of a cancer stage. I
Mhm.
don't think that it causes cancer, but, the cancer cells can use it to do their thing.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
therefore, and that's where people are, all upset on social media about me saying this, but I'm not telling them not to do it at all. But
Yeah.
if you have cancer, my cancer clients, I'm not recommending it. And so
Gotcha. Okay.
they have cancer cells, they have cancer tumors, they have metastasis spots, so therefore I'm not recommending it for them. So
Yeah.
that's my primary audience. So therefore, you know, it might be okay otherwise,
Mhm. Yeah.
although
Really, yeah.
it is
Go.
like an amino acid.
Mhm.
And so now, so we run into a similar issue. And so there's the individual collagens, the powders that
Mhm.
are available that are not collagen proteins.
Mhm.
And so those have just plain collagens, and we don't know for sure, about those. So we still need more research.
Okay.
So there's collagen, what, one, two, three, four, five,
Mhm.
different types of collagens. And, there's one study that shows that one particular type of a collagen may actually keep cancer cells from growing, while the others may, be a problem. And so I haven't had time to evaluate that yet, but
Yeah.
that's actually, most of these are actually test tube studies.
Okay.
Okay. So in what they do, they have films inside these plates, and they just monitor how the cancer cells grow through the plates. And when they add the collagen, it can help or potentially decrease some of that. But anyway, overall, the collagens seem to help that cancer to grow through that plate and that gel,
Boy.
kind of trying to mimic a body situation. Once again,
Right.
you know, my clients don't have 5 years to gather more human or even animal studies.
Right, because your clients are in the thick of it. I mean,
Yes.
they are in the thick of their cancer journey, battle, fill in the adjective that you want. And so they really need to get right to the core of what's going to work for them. So yeah, I definitely understand that. I have to tell you, sleep has been a struggle for me since cancer and forced into menopause and giving up all my precious hormones. And then I interviewed a physician on my podcast, and he was talking about grounding sheets. And I thought, this sounds a little bit, I'll just say it, a little bit wackadoo to me. But I was so desperate to be a better sleeper that I thought, what do I have to lose? I dove into the research, and there are really good studies that show sleeping on grounding sheets will actually reduce your cortisol levels. When your cortisol levels are lower, you have lower levels of inflammation. You're more likely to be in a parasympathetic, which is a good state. And if all those things are happening, you're going to be sleeping deeper. So again, I did my research and I found the best brand I could on the market. They're organic. They're 80% organic. They're soft. And you know what? I can't tell I'm sleeping on a grounding sheet. I have heard that some grounding sheets can be very rough, and these are soft, and they just continue to get softer with every wash. So the brand I love is called Ground Lux. So go to the link in my show notes. You're going to see the link to Ground Lux, and then you need to use the code ENOS20 to get 20% off of your entire purchase, which is actually pretty incredible. They were running sales like that during Black Friday, but certainly not in January and February. So I'm feeling super grateful that they have given me this code through the end of February. So use the code ENOS20 to get 20% off of your grounding sheets at Ground Lux. Enjoy. So it sounds like I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit. I'm going to read some research and take your information, read research, and maybe I don't do it every day. But I think with anything, be it, a glass of wine or, a homemade chocolate chip cookie, I'm not doing those things every day.
Right.
It's moderation. Yeah. With most things in life, moderation is key.
Exactly. So we can drink too much water.
We can drink too much water. Yeah. Especially.
I have clients that do that, and they're actually acidic because they're fatigued, they're sore, they're achy. Can't get pregnant, whatever, because they're drinking too much water.
Right. I had a client years ago, and he had horrible digestion issues. Just, he would eat bloated, this, that, and the other thing. And I said, well, tell me a little bit about your kind of like your eating hygiene. Like, how much water do you drink? And, blah, 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 blah. What time of day do you eat? And he said, well, I read online that I should drink 2 8-ounce glasses of water right before a meal, so it fills me up and then I don't eat as much. And I said, well, part of that is true. Yes, it will fill you up, but it's also going to completely dilute your stomach acid. So then you can't digest anything. So it sits in there and it putrefies basically. And then your gut, is this wide and you have cramps and you need to run to the bathroom while you're at work. So I tell you, I don't know if it's just the American culture, but we will take an idea and we will run with it. And so
exactly
moderation.
And and one of my posts also is about, and I'll do this every few months, about how much water to drink or beverage to drink with your meals. We just need enough of a liquid to wash the food down.
Sips of water.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
sips.
So we don't need that 12 to 16 ounces or more.
Right.
So yes. And that's one of the things I really monitor a lot with my clients is if they're acidic or not. And if you drink too much liquids with your meals, now you're going to dilute those meals, those nutrients down, and the stomach acids and enzymes. Now you're not going to absorb the nutrients, and now you're going to become more acidic.
Right.
So we work a lot with that.
I'll bet you do. Yeah, because that's a really key component and becoming more and more important as more research, good research has been completed. Okay, so Keith, do you have any other tips that will shock me?
Oh yes. Oh, another one.
I'm sitting down. Go ahead.
I'm really concerned about is actually that not too many people have been talking about, but it blew up on social media. Is actually drip coffee makers.
Oh, tell me. I love me some coffee. I mean, it wakes me up in the morning. Like I start waking up at like 5 a.m. thinking, I can't wait to go into my kitchen and have my cup of coffee. But okay, so tell me about drip coffee makers.
Well, have you seen information about the black plastic utensil concerns about the plastics and chemicals in those?
A little bit. Why don't you just give us a couple of tips for any listeners that maybe are not aware?
So black soft plastic utensils that were invented for Teflon and nonstick cooking.
Oh, okay.
Are actually often recycled plastics, and they add dyes to those to make them black or whatever color. And they're actually recycled plastics, and they're like computer parts and various different things.
Stop. Wait a second. You've got to be kidding me. So we are taking these black plastics, adding heat
exactly
and food.
Yes, and
Oh,
heat
Lord
and
have
food and
mercy.
oils and matter of fact, when you cook
Oh
that,
my
well, you
gosh.
can even feel. I've got some of those. You can feel where that's kind of breaking down and sometimes even bubbling,
Ugh,
and so these soft plastics, yeah, and they don't tell us what's in it. We have
of
no idea.
course. Of course. We're
There,
all in the dark.
yeah, there's no information. They don't have to tell anybody where they source this stuff, and the government doesn't regulate it,
Uh-huh.
and so therefore actually they use some similar type plastics to make drip coffee makers. Okay, so you know so we have hot water. So now first of all, okay, now the government has said that we're not supposed to be putting plastic you know dishes or of any kind, in the dishwasher.
Uh-huh.
It started off with baby bottles, years ago. The
Right.
plastics were leaching out, the BPA. Well, now they say really no plastics, or put the water top rack because it's not as hot up
Yeah.
there, and,
Yeah.
and things like
Right.
that. And
Right.
now we have this water that is close to boiling temperature, that's coming out
Hmm.
running through plastic and rubber pipes, inside that coffee maker. If you ever tear one apart, your husband may be a person that likes to look at stuff, but
Oh, he
you know,
sure is,
t-
Mr.
t-
Engineer.
yeah. And so, and and take that apart and look at it, you'll see the rubber and plastic hoses, going from the pumps, to the plastic basket that the filters are sitting in, and the filters have plastic in them also, unless they say specifically they don't have plastic.
Right. Right.
Going through that, so then it's going through that plastic. So we just have a lot of plastic involved in that.
So
And
much plastic. I mean, we're talking like almost 100% plastic, other than the carafe. So,
exactly, yeah,
right. So the
yeah.
carafe is the only safe part of a typical coffee maker. Okay, well, that's just such good news, Keith. Such good news. You shocked me. You win.
Okay,
You win, but America loses.
but
So
there are options. There are options.
yes, and I don't have a plastic
Okay,
because I do. I mean, I didn't know about the black plastic that I find shocking. That black
right.
plastic could be made with old computer parts, but
And who knows what else? I mean, really.
right, honestly, who knows? Yeah, the kitchen sink and lots of other things. So, what do you tell people to do?
Well, if you need that large amount of coffee, use a stainless steel or a glass percolator.
Hmm.
So, matter of fact, actually, so kind of, we need to go back in time just a little bit.
Okay.
So, my parents, used to have a glass percolator on the stove,
Yes.
and it was fun to watch, that process.
Yeah.
And they didn't have paper filters. There was a stainless
Yep.
basket inside there, and then I had some other relatives that had a metal percolator, and matter of fact, even one coffee company that was their ad was the sound of the coffee percolate
Oh. Huh.
bubbling through that, and Maxwell maybe was the brand, and I'm not going to mimic that sound. I can't do that,
Thank you.
but I need to practice that one,
Yeah, we'll come back to that later.
but the bubbling sound of the coffee that was their commercial was in a percolator. So a percolator, it's not expensive, stainless steel, and it will last a long time. I think it's definitely a safer option. And there's
Yeah.
electric or stovetop versions that you can
Hmm.
use for that. And then, and actually, what I use, and I don't have one sitting here, but I use a French press.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
love the French press.
I
Yeah.
do too. I love that. And matter of fact, my favorite is actually a stainless steel one,
Yep. Yep.
and
I have one right behind me.
it's insulated,
Yep.
and so it holds it hotter for a longer period of
Yep.
time.
I think it's Bodrum is mine.
Okay,
Bodrum, just for anybody who wants to get one. Yeah,
okay,
those are great. Yeah, I use my
yeah.
stainless steel French press.
And
Yeah.
I love that. I have a glass one, but I like that second mug, to be better and or warm, and
Yeah.
so I do love that.
Yeah, me too.
And And then, in the afternoon, and I will drink another cup. So I'm not against coffee,
Yeah,
but
me too.
I'll drink another cup in the afternoon, and I'll use a pour over, a stainless steel
Mhm.
pour over.
Yep.
Real simple, no filter, and a tablespoon of coffee, and pour that through. As a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting. There's a missionary couple that we sponsor, and they came by one day and and asked if they want a cup of coffee. I said yes, and they were actually from South Africa. And he goes, "Oh, a pour over. That is so neat." He said, "That's what we used back in Africa."
Oh,
And,
okay.
and oh, he was just all about it, just all right there,
That's
and
cool.
and a young person, very young in their
Hmm.
20s, and he just thought that was so neat because nobody else in Oklahoma does
Hmm.
anything like that.
Yep.
And but so it's inexpensive, it's simple. You don't have to have filters, which are another problem.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely, in favor of that type. Matter of fact, I've got a couple of them, and I've got one I keep at home. I've got another one I'll take when I travel
Yeah.
in my
Yeah.
suitcase. It's just
I think
ready to
it's
go,
such a great idea. Yeah.
ready to go. So if I'm in the hotel room, I don't have to do the pod type
Hmm.
option. So that's another one.
It's a whole other set of issues.
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about actually an inexpensive fix to
yes,
microplastics. Just you don't need the big fancy, you know, drip coffee maker. A good pour over is under $20.
yes, correct.
Yeah. Yeah. And a really good French press. It's probably going to be more like 50 or $60, but I have literally had that double walled insulated stainless steel French
Mhm.
press for probably 15 years.
Yeah.
And yeah,
hmm
it's not gonna go bad.
I've been using it for about 5 years or so,
Mhm.
and it's holding up great.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no rust or pits or
There's
anything.
no downside. Yeah.
Exactly. And even a
Yeah.
percolator is really not expensive. And
Yeah.
I've
I've never made coffee with the old fashioned on the stovetop
like
percolator, but
40, $60.
okay.
Yeah. So it's not
Okay.
expensive, and it will last for many years.
Hmm.
And it's got the stainless steel filtering mechanism in there.
Mhm.
You still could use a filter if you wanted, but I recommend not doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, you have officially shocked me.
Okay.
The black plastic. Okay, I'm still reeling
Oh,
from that one. But
so we need to give an option for that too, and
yeah, okay.
so wood utensils.
Okay, yeah,
So,
utensils. That's
so,
another shocking.
so,
Right.
so, so my wife, and so she's, oh no, not what else, and what else we got to change? And
Yeah.
so I said, okay, well, I'm getting in these wood utensils. And she says, I love these. They're
Oh,
great.
good. Okay.
They're shaped right. There's some
Right.
science behind it, and they make them so they fit and can scrape
Yeah.
and do everything. She loves them,
Huh.
and when we use that for a stainless, and for cast iron is usually what we use to cook with.
Hmm.
She loves them, and so it was not a major thing to get rid of
Yeah.
plastic utensils. Now we still keep a couple of those plastic ones to use in mixing bowls or something too.
Hmm.
So, and once again, I'm not just like totally avoiding them, but the heat, that's a problem.
The heat is a big problem. And you mentioned earlier about how they can bubble. And I remember back when I was probably in my 20s having a whole set of the plastic because that's what was available. And there was
Mhm.
zero information that it could be bad for me. And I remember, bubbling because I didn't know how to cook either. So I probably put this plastic thing in a really hot pan
Yeah.
and it's got bubbles on it, but I just like popped the bubbles and just kept using it because I was young and poor and didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
But again, there wasn't the awareness back then of how bad the plastics are for you. So,
Yeah. So
yeah.
now the plastics, and I think we always share just very briefly. So the plastics have estrogenic properties.
Hmm.
And so that's why we're talking about this. And the plastics, can attach to estrogen receptors and can stimulate cells,
Yeah.
in the body. And men and
Yeah.
women, we both have the same receptors. And so that's where we're coming from. We just need to reduce some of those plastics.
Yep.
And there's some questions about about the gut, and there's some new studies now. What's new is that we can actually measure the plastics. Beforehand, we
Yes.
didn't know how much plastics were, in beverages when we
Hmm.
ran them through these things. Now we know that the plastic bottles do have plastics in them, and
Hmm.
even every time you undo the plastic bottle, take a drink, and put the plastic cap back on that plastic bottle, you're putting more plastics inside it because it's grinding the plastic. And,
Right. Or I used to do this. I wouldn't want to buy a bunch of plastic water bottles in my travels. So I would just buy one at the beginning of the trip and then just keep refilling it,
mhm, right.
or you put it in the refrigerator. And, yeah, there's lots of things that are just going to release more plastic into your beverage.
Yeah, exactly. And so therefore, and so there are some cancer concerns about hormone related cancers
Hmm.
and then even intestinal and colon, colorectal cancers too.
Hmm.
And they're actually starting to actually measure those plastics in the lining of the intestines.
Smart. I
Yes.
didn't know that type of testing could be done. And we need it. We need it because colorectal cancer is off the charts
And getting worse
with
for
young
young people.
people.
Yes. Hmm.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
therefore, we've not we've done this convenience thing over the years, the past 30 years, and it's quick and fast. We used to call it the microwave society. I don't know
Yep.
what we call it now, but we
Yeah.
want it fast. We don't want to wait. We want it fast. We want it to go, and that's creating problems.
It's creating a big problem. But now we've trained people to need results immediately, from texting somebody to, standing in front of the microwave tapping your foot because it's not working fast enough. And we have such a short attention span and a patience, level of patience.
Sure.
And I don't, I do feel like there is more awareness now. And I love, what's going on in our government these days. With Make America Healthy Again, and people just having more awareness over the dyes in food and the
Yes.
convenience, but the terrible health impact of saying, Cheerios or I think it was Fruit Loops were not as healthy as eggs, or Fruit Loops were healthier than eggs because of the cholesterol issue. I mean, we've allowed large food companies to really dictate what is healthy in our country. And I do, for the first time in 30 plus years that I've been in this field, I'm starting to see people really pay attention and they're listening. And I'd like to think it's not a bipartisan, political, either any of the parties issue. It's a health issue. And we need to figure out why our kids are so unhealthy and getting cancer at such high rates. And some of the things we're talking about today could really make a difference.
Definitely. And so yes, we just need to share that information, with
Hmm.
loved ones and our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren,
Yep.
and otherwise they just don't know.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a challenge. Young people are healthy, and I remember I thought I'd live to be 100.
Hmm.
And now I go, I'm probably not going to make that. So I am
Yeah.
mortal. I am mortal. And,
Yep.
but also I don't want to increase those risks of earlier death
Right.
and
Right.
complications before that, the appropriate time.
Hmm.
So yes, we do have to share this. So those that are watching this video, if you know somebody's doing some of these things, share that with them. So these are items that will decrease the risk of not just cancer, but other health issues. We're going to learn so much more. And
Right.
it's, it's sad, but it's going to be 10, 20 years from now and history is going to look back and go, what were those people
What
doing?
were they thinking? Right. What were they thinking?
Right.
Yeah. And the reality is, every generation has its thing
Mm-hmm.
that is incredibly unhealthy for them. For, Gen Zers, it might be that they've been on social media since they were 10 years old, and they don't know how to connect with people, or, I mean, every generation has their thing, but whatever we can do to help people mitigate their cancer risk and prevail over cancer if they're diagnosed, I am all in with bringing awareness. And you've shocked me. You've given me a couple of good shocks, and I bet you have a couple of more things in your repertoire of things that can shock me. Okay, hey, dry January peeps. Let's move into February. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about alcohol. There's been a lot of research lately about alcohol and cancer, and there are health experts now saying that alcohol is the new smoking. So I think we just need to be prepared, because I still like to have a festive drink while my friends might be having a glass of wine. So enter in Martinelli apple cider, and they started making non-alcohol, unfermented drinks back in 1917, right before Prohibition. So they were preparing for Prohibition. And they have some recipes on their website. One of my favorite is the Martinelli apple cider ginger mule. I'm going to post the recipe in the show notes. It is so great. It's got real apples in it, apple cider, ginger beer. I usually do the zero sugar ginger beer. There's lots of those available to knock the calorie count down even more. So that way I can have two. So again, I'm a huge fan of Martinelli apple cider. They've got lots of different flavors, including pear and mango, and they've also got some organic products too. So I hope this helps you move from dry January into a dry February, or as some of my friends call it, a damp February. So maybe you're cutting back on alcohol by 50%, which is, again, a huge bonus. So I think it's a lot easier to cut back on alcohol when we have alternatives. So that's why, again, I'm a huge fan of Martinelli apple cider, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for joining me for part 1 with Keith Bishop. Join me next week for part 2, where we talk about workarounds, because these things are in our environment and they're not going away. We talked about emulsifiers. Who even knows what an emulsifier is? But Keith breaks it down for us. We're talking about that on part 2. And one of the things I love about Keith's information is he does offer suggestions of, hey, instead of doing this, try this. So why don't you try listening to part 2 next week? I know you're going to enjoy it.